Hello everyone, welcome to another video. So in the previous video of this series, I talked about how we built up these expressions in our equation, starting from our unknown, from our x, for example. Now, when you work through these types of questions, we're always considering the order in which things were applied or done to my unknown variable, we call that, my unknown pronumeral or variable x. And in doing so, we can start to think about how we can peel back the layers to our equation. And this process we call solving equations systematically. We have a system that we can use to solve all equations. And this helps a lot for some of you who may know the answer maybe, but struggle to show working out. This is very common in equations. Some people can just see this and just know what the number is. This is a system for us to show how we are stripping away our equation to get to our unknown x. So let's consider this first question. Now, here I have x divided by 2 plus 4 equals 7. Now, from the perspective of x, what was the last thing done to it? Now, here we can see it was divided by 2, and then 4 was added to this entire thing on the left. So we divided x by 2, and then to this thing, we added 4. So the last thing we did was add 4. Now, let's think, if I add 4 to a number and I get 7, what should that number be? Well, that number should be 4 less than 7. Let me say that again. If we add 4 to an unknown number, we don't know it, 4 plus something gives me 7. That something will be 3 or 4 less than 7. And you can see it may look coincidental, but it's actually not, because we've now come up with a system for this. This is the same as doing the opposite operation to this. Here we're plussing 4, that's the last thing we did. So the first thing we do in peeling back the layers to our equation is we do the opposite. We minus 4. And this is going to cancel out with our plus 4, because taking positive 4 and subtracting 4 to it gives me 0, or x over 2 plus 0, which I can also write as just x over 2 equals, what's 7 minus 4? That is 3. So we have taken the first step in working backwards, in stripping our equation down to make it more digestible and easier to work with. Now let's look at what we've done here. We're saying a number divided by 2 gives me 3. Now, if you know your times tables, you may be able to figure this one out already, but I'm going to do it a little bit slower. So something divided by 2 gives me 3. So that's something we can write as 3 times 2. And I'm going to do that to both sides of my equation, because that undoes the dividing by 2. Dividing something by 2, then timesing by 2, undoes the operation. So I'm doing this to both sides, and I end up with, well, x on the left-hand side, the thing I'm looking for, and on the right-hand side, 3 times 2, which is 6. So some of you who know your times tables, I hope would be most of you, 6 divided by 2 gives me 3. And I can also write 6 as 2 times 3. And that's what this opposite operation is doing. See, once again, we have stripped this away by considering the order in which things were done to x. We have taken the last thing that was done to it. Whoops, sorry guys. We've taken the last thing that was done to it, which is plussing 4. And then we did the opposite. We subtracted 4. Then we looked at the next thing. We divided by 2. So we times by 2. We're always doing the opposite. We're finding what x was here, for example, before it was divided by 2. Now, let's try another question and we'll wrap up. Let's do 3x. Let's make it nice numbers, maybe. Let's go 4x plus 2 divided by 3 equals, let's say, let's say 6. Okay. Hope I've done the maths right. Hope this gives us a nice answer. But if it doesn't, it's all good. Let's look here. Now, this is we were talking before about two-step equations. So for example, here, we took 2 steps in solving the equations. This is a multi-step equation or a 3-step equation. So we can see, let's consider how we built x. Now, from the perspective of x, the first thing that was done to it was we multiplied it by 4. Then to 4x, we added 2. Then to this whole expression up top, we divided by 3. So let's go through that again slowly. In building up from x, so we're always looking from the perspective of x. What was the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, or the last thing to get done to this? And looking at the last thing that we did to it can tell us what the first step will be in going the other way. So once again, we multiplied this x by 4, and then we added 2 to this 4 lots of x. Then we took my 4x plus 2 and divided all of that by 3. So the last thing we did is we divided by 3. So that gives us a little hint as to what our first step may be. Now, something on the numerator, doesn't matter what 4x plus 2 is, we know we're going to take multiple steps to find out exactly what x is. But we know that when we divided this thing on the top by the bottom, so when we divided the numerator by 3, we got 6. So what is a number that divides by 3 to give me 6? Well, we can find that number by timesing the 3 and the 6, by timesing both sides by 3. Once again, we are doing the opposite. So some of you may have been able to do this in your head, and we would have gotten that something divided by 3 gives me 6, so that something must have been 3 lots of 6. And that number on the numerator then must be 18, because 3 times 6 is 18. So, and we have an expression for the numerator, 4x plus 2 then has to equal 18. So dividing by 3 was the last thing we did. So multiplying by 3, doing the opposite, is going to be the first thing we do that undoes this, that strips away the layer of our equation. Equals 18. What was the second last thing we did to the x? Well, if you guys remember, that was plussing 2 here. So my 4x When I add 2 to it, I get 18. What should then my 4x be equal to? Or in other words, what number adds to 2 to give me 18? Well, we can find that number, again, by doing the opposite. That number should be the difference between 8 and 2, or 8 minus 2. Something plus 2 gives me 18, then that's something I can find by just doing 18 minus 2. And once again, I'm going to minus 2 from both sides, because on this left-hand side, my plus 2 that I have here, when I subtract 2 from that, that gives me 0. So my 4x, or my 4x plus 0, I can just write as 4x. And 4x should equal to 16 here, because 18 minus 2 gives me 16. Now, we're at the very last step. What times is by x to give me 16? I'll go through this a little quicker. Well, some of you, if you know your times tables, you can just tell me immediately what x is. But once again, we're timesing by 4 here, so I can do the opposite. I can divide by 4, and this will cancel out the multiplication of 4, leaving me with x equals 4. And it's important to note here, we can check that my answer is correct by taking this answer and substituting it back into my expression or my equation at the top, my first line. Because, like we said before, solving an equation is finding a value for our unknown that makes the left-hand side equal the right-hand side, that makes this equation true. So substituting something back in means that I'm just writing, instead of this x here, I'm writing 4. So let's check that. What was it? So 4, my equation was 4x plus 2 over 3 equals 6. Let me just double check that. Perfect. So I'm going to take my value here, because I have a value for x here. I found a value for x here. So to check that it works, I'm going to substitute that into where my x lies in my equation. So I'm going to get, let's do this in a different color, 4 times 4 plus 2 divided by 3 equals 6. So 4 times 4 gives me 16. 16 plus 2 gives me 18. Divided by 3 equals 6. And I get, as an answer, when I divide 18 by 3, 6 equals 6. So I have I found a value of x that satisfies my equation, that makes my equation true. Now, if you remember before, what makes an equation true is that one side equals the other side. So 6 equals 6. This is a true equation. And now we have a system that we can use that no matter how many steps we have in this equation, no matter how complicated it gets, we can just always try to strip this back by considering how we built up from the unknown pronumeral in our question. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you next time.